Steve Harvey had seen everything on the Family Feud stage. He had seen families argue, cry, celebrate, and fall apart. He had seen answers so wild that he could not even speak for a full 30 seconds. But in all his years of hosting, nothing could have prepared him for what was about to happen on a quiet Thursday afternoon in April 2024. Because when a wife decided to expose her husband's deepest secret on live television, in front of 200 strangers and millions of viewers at home, even Steve Harvey had no words. He just stood there, silent. And the truth that came out that day proved that some lies are too big to stay hidden forever. If stories like this hit you in the heart, go ahead and smash that like button and subscribe to the channel right now. We bring you the most incredible moments from Family Feud every single week, and believe me, you're going to want to see what happens next. The Williams family from Atlanta, Georgia walked onto the Family Feud stage looking like the definition of a perfect family. There were 5 of them standing behind the podium. The team captain was 42-year-old Derek Williams, a tall man with a bright smile and an expensive watch that caught the studio lights every time he moved his hands. Beside him stood his wife Vanessa, 40 years old, wearing a simple but elegant black dress and pearl earrings that had belonged to her mother. Behind them stood Derek's brother James, Derek's college friend Marcus, and Vanessa's younger sister Tanya. On the other side of the stage was the Robinson family from Memphis, Tennessee. They were a loud, joyful family of 5 who had driven 8 hours in a minivan to be there. They were excited, energetic, and ready to play. But this story is not really about the Robinsons. This story is about the Williams family and the secret that had been eating away at the foundation of their marriage for almost 10 years. Derek and Vanessa Williams had been married for 17 years. They had met in college at Spelman and Morehouse in Atlanta. Derek was a business major with big dreams, and Vanessa was studying nursing. They fell in love during their sophomore year and got married 2 years after graduation. Everyone who knew them said they were the perfect couple. Derek built a successful car dealership from the ground up. Vanessa became a registered nurse and eventually a nurse practitioner at one of Atlanta's biggest hospitals. They had 2 children together, a 15-year-old son named Marcus Jr., and a 12-year-old daughter named Destiny. From the outside, the Williams family had everything: a beautiful home in a nice neighborhood, 2 healthy children, good careers. They went to church every Sunday. They hosted neighborhood cookouts every 4th of July. Derek coached his son's basketball team. Vanessa volunteered at the children's school. To everyone who saw them, they were living proof that hard work and love could build a beautiful life. But Vanessa had been carrying a weight on her shoulders for 9 months. 9 months of sleepless nights, of staring at her phone, of replaying conversations in her head trying to figure out if she was crazy or if her instincts were right. It had started with a phone call. Derek's phone had rung during dinner one evening, and he had jumped up from the table so fast that he knocked over his water glass. He took the call in the garage with the door closed. When he came back, he said it was a client. Vanessa had nodded and said nothing, but she had seen the name on the screen. It said Monique, and she did not know any Monique. Over the next few months, Vanessa noticed more things, late nights at the dealership that did not add up. Cash withdrawals from their joint account that Derek could not explain. A second phone that she found in the glove compartment of his truck. She did not confront him, not yet. Instead, she did what a nurse does. She gathered evidence. She observed. She documented. And 3 months before the Family Feud taping, she found the truth. A photograph on Derek's second phone of a little girl about 7 years old with Derek's exact same eyes and his exact same smile. And a text message that read, "Daddy, when are you coming to see me again?" The child's name was Zoe. She lived in Birmingham, Alabama. Her mother's name was Monique. And Derek had been supporting them financially for 7 years while lying to Vanessa's face every single day. Vanessa did not scream. She did not throw things. She did not pack her bags. She put the phone back in the glove compartment, walked into her house, kissed her children goodnight, and sat in the dark kitchen for 3 hours. She thought about her mother, who had died 2 years earlier from cancer. Her mother had always told her that the truth was like a seed. You could bury it as deep as you wanted, but eventually it would grow through the concrete and find the light. Vanessa decided that the truth was going to find the light, and she was going to choose exactly when and where that happened. When the Family Feud invitation came 6 weeks later, Vanessa saw her moment. The game started like any other episode. Steve Harvey came out, got the crowd going, and introduced both families. The Williams family looked comfortable on stage. Derek was working the crowd, waving and flashing his big smile. He was the kind of man who knew how to make people like him. He shook Steve's hand firmly and cracked a joke about being nervous, even though he clearly was not nervous at all. Vanessa stood beside him, quiet and composed. She smiled when the cameras were on her, but if you looked closely, her smile never quite reached her eyes. The first round went smoothly. The Williams family won the face-off and swept the board. Derek was loud and confident with his answers. He high-fived his brother after every correct response. When Steve asked him a question about marriage, Derek put his arm around Vanessa and said, "This woman right here is my rock, 17 years and counting. I don't know what I would do without her." The audience clapped. Steve smiled. Vanessa said nothing. She just nodded and looked straight ahead at the board. Between rounds, Steve chatted with the family. He asked Vanessa what she did for a living. She told him she was a nurse practitioner and that she had been working in healthcare for 16 years. Steve was genuinely impressed. 16 years, that's dedication. What keeps you going? Vanessa paused for a moment before answering. My mother was a nurse. She worked in a community clinic in South Atlanta for 30 years. She used to say that nursing was not just a job, it was a calling. She passed away 2 years ago, but I feel her with me every day, especially when things get hard. Steve's expression softened. I'm sorry about your mother. She sounds like she was an incredible woman. Vanessa touched the pearl earrings she was wearing. These were hers. I wear them every time I need her strength. Something in the way she said it made Steve look at her a little longer than usual. There was something underneath her calm surface. He could feel it, but he could not name it. The second round brought a face-off between Derek and the Robinson family captain. The question was, name a secret someone might keep from their spouse. The audience laughed. Steve grinned. It was supposed to be a light-hearted question. Derek buzzed in first and said how much money they spent. It was on the board. Everyone laughed. The game continued, but Vanessa, standing 3 feet behind her husband, closed her eyes for just a moment. Her sister Tanya reached over and squeezed her hand. Tanya knew. She had known for 2 months. She had been the first person Vanessa had told, and she had begged Vanessa not to do what she was planning to do, but Vanessa had made up her mind. The Williams family won the second round as well. They were dominating the game. Derek was in his element, feeding off the energy of the audience and playing to the cameras. He was charming and funny and completely in control, or at least he thought he was. During the commercial break, Vanessa excused herself to go to the restroom. Tanya followed her. In the hallway outside the studio, Tanya grabbed her sister's arm and whispered, Vanessa, please, not here, not like this. Think about the kids. Vanessa looked at her sister with an expression that was not angry, not sad, but resolved. She said, I have thought about the kids. I have thought about nothing else for 9 months. My children deserve a mother who tells the truth, and I deserve to stop pretending. She straightened her dress, touched her mother's earrings, and walked back onto the stage. The third round started, and it was the final round before fast money. Both families were competitive, and the energy in the studio was high. Steve asked the next face-off question directly to Derek and the opposing captain. Name something that could end a marriage instantly. The Robinson captain buzzed in and said, cheating. Number 1 answer. The audience reacted. The game continued on the Robinson side, but something had shifted in the air on the Williams side of the stage. Derek's smile had flickered just for half a second. His brother James glanced at Vanessa. Marcus, Derek's college friend who was also on the team, shifted his weight from one foot to the other. He knew about Monique. He had known for years. He had helped Derek cover it up. And standing on that stage with Vanessa 3 feet away, he could feel the walls closing in. The Robinsons won the third round. It came down to the final round to decide who would go to fast money. Steve set up the last face-off, and this time it was Vanessa's turn to step up to the podium against the Robinson captain. Steve looked at both of them and smiled. All right, ladies, this one's for fast money. Here we go. He read the question. Name something a wife might find that proves her husband is lying. The audience laughed nervously. It was one of those questions that hit a little too close to home for a lot of people. The Robinson captain buzzed in first and said, a text message. It was on the board, but before Steve could continue, Vanessa spoke. Steve. Vanessa's voice was calm and clear. It cut through the noise of the studio like a bell. Steve turned to her. Yes, Vanessa. She did not look at the board. She did not look at the audience. She looked directly at Derek. I found a second phone in my husband's truck, and on that phone I found a picture of a 7-year-old little girl who looks exactly like him. A little girl named Zoe who lives in Birmingham with her mother, Monique. A little girl my husband has been hiding from me and our children for 7 years. The studio went completely silent, not the kind of quiet that happens when someone says something funny and people are waiting for the punchline. The kind of quiet that happens when the air gets sucked out of a room. Steve Harvey stood at his podium with his mouth slightly open. His cards hung at his side. He did not move. He did not speak. For what felt like an eternity, the only sound in the studio was the low hum of the overhead lights. Derek's face went through several stages in about 3 seconds. Confusion, recognition, fear. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. His brother James took a step back from the podium, physically distancing himself. Marcus, the college friend, looked at the floor. He could not meet anyone's eyes. Tanya, standing behind Vanessa, had tears streaming down her face. She reached forward and put her hand on her sister's back. The audience sat frozen in their seats. Several people had their hands over their mouths. A woman in the third row was already crying. Steve Harvey was the first to move. He set his cards down on the podium slowly. He took a breath, and then he did something that the producers did not expect. He walked out from behind his podium, crossed the stage, and stood directly in front of Vanessa, not in front of Derek, in front of Vanessa. He looked her in the eyes and said, very quietly, "Are you okay?" It was not a question for the cameras. It was not a question for the audience. It was one human being checking on another human being who had just done the bravest and most terrifying thing of her life. Vanessa nodded. "I'm okay, Steve. I needed to say it out loud. I have been carrying this for 9 months and I could not carry it anymore." Steve nodded slowly. Then he turned to Derek. The transformation in Steve's demeanor was something the audience would never forget. He went from gentle and concerned with Vanessa to something harder, something that looked like controlled anger mixed with deep disappointment. "Derek, I'm going to give you one chance right now. One chance. Is what she said true?" The studio held its breath. Derek's hands were shaking. He wiped his face with his palm, and in a voice that was barely above a whisper, he said, "Yes." A gasp moved through the audience like a wave. Several people shook their heads. A man in the back row stood up and then sat back down, as if his body could not decide what to do with the emotion he was feeling. Steve closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, he spoke directly to Derek, and every word landed like a stone dropped into still water. "I am not going to yell at you. I am not going to call you names. That is not my job. But I am going to tell you the truth because somebody needs to. You have a wife who stood beside you for 17 years. A woman who works 12-hour shifts saving people's lives and then comes home to take care of your children. A woman who wore her dead mother's earrings today because she needed strength just to stand on this stage and face what you did to her. And you lied to her every single day. For 7 years. That is not a mistake, Derek. A mistake happens once. What you did was a choice you made over and over again every day for 7 years. The audience erupted. The applause was not celebratory. It was a release, the sound of 200 people who had been holding their breath finally exhaling. Steve waited for the noise to settle, then turned back to Vanessa. "Vanessa, I want you to know something. What you just did took more courage than most people will ever have in their entire lives. You did not do this to embarrass anyone. I can see that. You did this because you were tired of living a lie, and you have every right to stand in your truth." Vanessa's composure finally cracked. The tears she had been holding back for 9 months came all at once. She covered her face with her hands and sobbed. Tanya wrapped her arms around her sister. Even James, Derek's own brother, walked across the stage and stood near Vanessa, not near Derek. He put his hand on Tanya's shoulder and said, quietly but clearly enough for the microphones to pick up, "I'm sorry, Vanessa. I'm so sorry." It was clear that James had not known about Zoe, and in that moment he was choosing the right side. Eve made a decision. He turned to the producers and said, "We're going to pause. When this family is ready, and only when they're ready, we will figure out what happens next." It was not standard protocol. The show had a schedule, a budget, a taping timeline. But Steve Harvey had been in the television business long enough to know that some moments were bigger than television. This was one of them. During the break, the production team offered to stop taping entirely and let the Williams family go home. But Vanessa surprised everyone. She wiped her eyes, straightened her dress, and said, "I want to play fast money. I came here to win something for my children, and that has not changed." The producers looked at Steve. Steve looked at Vanessa, and he smiled for the first time in 20 minutes. "Then let's play." The Robinsons, who had won the final round, graciously offered to let the Williams family take their fast money spot. The Robinson matriarch walked across the stage, hugged Vanessa, and whispered something in her ear that made Vanessa smile through her tears. The Robinsons received their consolation prize and left the stage as heroes in their own right. Vanessa and Tanya played fast money. Tanya went first and scored 134 points. Then Vanessa stepped up to the podium. Steve stood beside her and said, "Play for your kids, play for your mom, she's watching." Vanessa closed her eyes, touched her mother's earrings one last time, and nodded. She answered all 5 questions in 16 seconds. When the answers were revealed, she had scored 84 points, bringing the total to 218. They had won $20,000. Vanessa did not jump or scream. She simply turned around, walked to her sister, and held her. They stood together, holding each other, while the audience gave them a standing ovation that lasted nearly a full minute. After the taping ended, Steve Harvey spent nearly an hour with Vanessa and Tanya in a private room backstage. No cameras, no producers, just conversation. He told Vanessa that she reminded him of the strong women who had raised him, women who would rather face the hardest truth than live with the easiest lie. He asked her what she needed, not as a television host, but as a person who cared. Vanessa told him that she did not need anything except a fresh start for herself and her children. Steve gave her his personal contact information and told her that if she ever needed help with a lawyer, with counseling, with anything, she should call him. It was a promise he would keep. When the episode aired 5 weeks later, it became the most watched Family Feud episode in 3 years. The clip of Vanessa's revelation was viewed over 80 million times across social media in the first week alone. News networks covered it. Podcasts dissected it. Relationship experts analyzed it. But the conversation that mattered most was happening in living rooms and kitchens and bedrooms across the country, where couples were sitting down and having honest conversations about secrets, about trust, and about what they owed each other. Thousands of people reached out to Vanessa through social media. Women wrote to her saying that her courage had inspired them to confront their own situations. Men wrote to her saying that watching the episode had been a wake-up call, that they had seen themselves in Derek, and it had scared them into being honest with their partners. Therapists and marriage counselors reported a noticeable increase in couples seeking help in the weeks following the episode. One counselor in Atlanta told a local news station that 3 separate couples had come to her office saying, "We saw that Family Feud episode, and we realized we needed to talk." Vanessa used the $20,000 to retain a family attorney and begin divorce proceedings. The process was difficult but necessary. She and Derek agreed to a civil separation for the sake of their children. Marcus Jr. and Destiny struggled at first, as any children would. But Vanessa was honest with them in an age-appropriate way, and she made sure they knew that both of their parents loved them, even though their parents could no longer be together. She also made a decision that surprised many people. She reached out to Monique, Zoe's mother, and asked if they could meet. The meeting happened at a coffee shop in Birmingham. It lasted 2 hours. Both women cried. Neither woman blamed the other. They talked about their children and about the man who had lied to both of them. When they left, they exchanged phone numbers. 6 months later, Marcus Jr. and Destiny met their half-sister Zoe for the first time. Vanessa said it was one of the most complicated and beautiful days of her life. The children played together in a park while the 2 mothers sat on a bench and watched. Zoe looked exactly like Marcus Jr. There was no denying the connection. And rather than letting that connection be a source of pain, Vanessa chose to let it become a source of healing. 1 year after the episode, Family Feud brought Vanessa back for a special update segment. She walked onto the stage in a white blazer and her mother's pearl earrings, looking like a woman who had walked through fire and come out stronger on the other side. Steve Harvey greeted her with a long hug that said more than words could. "How are you doing, Vanessa?" he asked. She smiled, and this time the smile reached her eyes. "I'm good, Steve. I'm really good." She told the audience that she had completed her divorce and was living in a new home with her children. She had been promoted to a senior position at the hospital. Marcus Jr. was thriving in school and had been accepted into a summer leadership program. Destiny had started writing poetry and had won a school competition with a poem about strong women. And Zoe had visited them twice, spending weekends playing with her siblings and slowly becoming part of a larger, more honest family. Vanessa had also started a blog called Truth First, where she wrote about her experience and offered support to other women navigating betrayal and rebuilding their lives. The blog had attracted over 200,000 readers in its first year and had led to speaking invitations at women's conferences and church groups across the Southeast. Steve turned to the camera and spoke directly to the viewers at home. "I want to say something to everyone watching. I have been doing this a long time. I have seen a lot of things on this stage. But what Vanessa did, standing in her truth when it would have been so much easier to stay quiet, that is the kind of courage that changes families, changes communities, and changes lives. If you are sitting at home right now carrying a secret that is eating you alive, whether it is yours or someone else's, I want you to know that the truth is not your enemy. The truth is the only thing that can set you free." Vanessa's daughter Destiny, now 13, was asked by her school counselor to write about a person she admired for a class project. She chose her mother. In her essay, she wrote, "My mom taught me that being brave does not mean you are not scared. Being brave means you do the right thing even when you are terrified." She stood on a stage in front of the whole world and told the truth, even though her voice was shaking and her heart was breaking. That is what a hero looks like, not someone with powers. Just someone with principles. The essay was shared at a school assembly and received a standing ovation from students and teachers alike. As for Derek, his story took a quieter path. He lost his marriage, and for a time he lost the respect of many people around him. But to his credit, he did not run from the consequences. He entered therapy. He began building a real relationship with Zoe, openly and honestly, rather than in the shadows. He worked to rebuild trust with Marcus Jr. and Destiny. It was a slow, painful process. Vanessa said in one interview that she did not hate Derek. She said, "Hate takes too much energy. I would rather use that energy to build a life my children can be proud of. And if Derek can become a better father because the truth came out, then something good came from all of this." That kind of grace under pressure was exactly what made Vanessa's story resonate with so many people. The pearl earrings that Vanessa wore on the day of the taping still sit in a small velvet box on her nightstand. She puts them on every morning before work, just as her mother used to do. She says they remind her that strength is not something you are born with. It is something you choose every single day, especially on the days when choosing it feels impossible. Her mother had been right. The truth really was like a seed. You could bury it as deep as you wanted, but it would always find the light. The story of Vanessa Williams and what happened on the Family Feud stage that day has been viewed over 100 million times worldwide. It has been discussed in marriage counseling sessions, at women's retreats, in college classrooms, and around dinner tables in every state in the country. It is not just a story about infidelity. It is a story about what happens when a person refuses to live a lie, even when the lie is comfortable and the truth is terrifying. It is a story about a mother who loved her children enough to show them what integrity looked like, even when it cost her everything she thought she had. If this story moved you, do me a favor right now. Hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another video like this one. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Because sometimes one moment of truth can change a whole life. And sometimes that life might be yours. We will see you in the next one.